I don't need a stupid robot to tell me what to drink. And
Mm,
although I love when people comment that because it's great for our reach,
sure. It's like the rage bait.
rage bait's a whole other topic. I'd love to talk about it. It really works, unfortunately. Um,
Welcome to the Wine Centric Show. As always, I have a titan. This gentleman is a rising titan in the space of cellar management and something that we have not yet talked about here on the Wine Centric Show, but wine tech. He is the CEO of InVintory, Mr. Joshua Daiter. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an intro. That I definitely don't think of myself that way, but I really appreciate it.
Well, two master's degree, one in entrepreneurship and one in AI, and then this platform that is, like I said, the soon to be digital hub for all wine enthusiasts and collectors. You have earned it. So, Josh, let's jump in right there because I want to know, as all great companies or technologies start out, what problem does inventory solve?
Yeah, I mean, well, inventory started out solving one problem. We've kind of expanded into a multifaceted kind of version of multiple problems that we solve. But essentially, we started with the one goal of helping collectors find what they have in their cellar. And it's very important that I double click on the find because when we originally started the company back in, the first versions were in like 2018, there was Cellar Tracker, there's Vivino. Of course, people track their cellar on Excel. There are many different ways to manage your collection. But the one thing that none of these actually accomplished was helping you find a bottle in your cellar. Where exactly in my wine cellar is this bottle? And so that's sort of the problem that this was born out of, less so becoming like, a bigger competitor in the space. It was more like solving a problem that the other platforms didn't solve. So that's the main thing. But inventory has expanded into solving all sorts of problems, helping people learn more about wine, helping you understand how to buy better wine, how to, pick bottles from your cellar. We solve, so many different problems and for different people. We've expanded from private collectors into, serving some enterprise customers, hotels, restaurants, yachts, etc. So as any business goes, you start doing one thing and you just follow the breadcrumbs and you end up doing multiple things.
Yeah, I always have that problem on my yacht where I cannot find the bottle that I want to.
Oh, same.
So I want to get to all these cool technologies because, like I said, you're really putting the space on fire. But I think it's a very personal story. It's not like you were just some tech nerd out there that was like, let me figure out where to find my wine or whatever. It was a very real personal problem within your family.
That's true. And I will say I still identify as a tech nerd and that's still partially true. And actually when we started, I was not into wine at all. So back in 2018, when the first version of the product kind of was built, we launched in 2021. So it was like a 3 years in the making type of thing, slow burn. But when we first started, I was not into wine. My dad was super into wine. He started a business here in Canada, sold it. He had a couple other businesses that he sold as well. And he just wanted to retire, drink his wine, write screenplays, which is now what he's doing now. We can kind of get into that later if you want, but
Yeah.
he's just collecting wine. And I was in school.
Also, as far as entrepreneurship, it's not like the chip fell far off the block in the sense that he was a doctor and then he started something like 70 medical clinics that he owned. So he kind of knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. My dad is like he's a bit of a renaissance man. Like he's on to his third career now, which is crazy. Starting doctor, businessman, wine tech CEO for a bit, and now movie producer. So he's an interesting guy.
I love that. So yeah, he had created these 70 clinics. So kind of maybe set a roadmap, but on a very simple, very tangible level was he couldn't find his wine.
Yeah.
And so he said to you, because you were already sort of building apps with your AI background and your master's in AI. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So in university, I kind of caught the entrepreneurship bug. My dad always told me that the best person to be your boss is yourself.
Mm,
And after doing some internships, I love those internships, but I did realize quickly that I liked doing my own thing, even within those companies. And so in university, I started a business with a friend that actually allows people to kind of classic university thing to let people skip the line at a bar or nightclub. So we tried to get that live. Funny, it's actually, ours didn't go very far, but there is a business that does that now. And so some people took it to the next level after us. So we
Wait,
built it out.
give us the secret. What is the secret to skip the line in a nightclub?
Pay money, skip the line. That was the premise. So
Okay.
you download the app, you pay extra dollars to skip the line, goes directly into the bar owner or nightclub owner's pocket, and you get to the front. We quickly learned that it didn't really work for several reasons, at least at the time that we did it, because I think some bar owners and nightclub owners don't want their revenue digitally tracked. So that was a bit of an issue
Very
for
true.
us. But throughout that process, I caught the bug of entrepreneurship. Like I knew this is what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to create things and sell them. However, I was to do that, that was obviously ended up becoming inventory, but that's sort of how I caught that bug.
Yeah. It's like what you were describing. It's like a lightning lane pass for those that go to Disney for nightclubs. I love it.
Yeah.
So I think your dad was dealing with something that probably a lot of people who are listening were dealing with, is that he was keeping, was he keeping his inventory spelled the traditional way, not like your company with the INVINTORY, but he was like keeping it on an Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yeah. I mean, he used the other platforms, but he ended up resorting to Excel because it was just
Okay.
the best thing that helped him do it.
So what was the moment where you said, you know what, Dad, like he came to you and he's like, you know how this AI stuff works. You know how this digital stuff works. Help me. And you're like, yeah, I could figure this out. What was the moment or what was the initial idea?
Yeah. The moment is actually, it sounds like it's made up, but it's actually completely true. He was in Florida and he was looking for a bottle in his wine fridge, and he was pulling out all the shelves, and he pulled out one of the shelves after looking for like 5 to 8 minutes or whatever. And the bottle he was looking for actually rolled off the shelf and it broke.
Mm.
Juice all over the floor. Had to clean it up. It ruined his evening because he was, first of all, the bottle he was looking for broke, and he has to clean it up. And then the next morning he called me and just said, I'm just fed up with this problem of having to like look for my bottles. Even having to go in and disturb them as I pull the shelves out. I just want to know where it is. And I took a look, and the first thing I said to him was, Dad, there's just no way that there's a market for this. Like how big is this market? I can't believe that this is a real thing. And I did my research, found Cellar Tracker, found Vivino, dug into the market and realized, you know what? I think we can do better than what these apps have built. And so that was the moment where things kind of started.
What was the bottle? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I'd have to go ask him. It's probably, if it made him that upset, it was probably nice or something he couldn't replicate.
Yeah. And also he was thinking about it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
when we have a moment, we'll put it in the show notes or we'll,
You know what? That's never been, I've told that story a few times and no one has ever asked me that question. So I'm going to go back and ask him that question.
we got to know what the bottle was. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the Caymus 40-year anniversary bottle. Okay. So he's on Cellar Tracker and he has his wines there, but they're not really giving him the information, right? So what are the next steps that you do with that information?
Yeah. He had Cellar Tracker, went back to Excel, and then he's like, well, he's such a creative guy. So he's like, how on earth do we help people find their bottles? And him and I remember we were on a trip in Mexico. I spent the whole trip indoors building this or trying to build like a prototype of this thing back in 2019. And we just had so many discussions about ways to find bottles. And the one thing that really stood out to us was augmented reality. It was so early then, but it was such a cool technology. And we thought it would be really cool to hold your phone up to your wine cellar and pick a bottle that you're looking for, and through the phone, see in real life, like where that bottle actually is. And then we were like, oh, one day when there's AR glasses, you'll just wear the glasses and you'll pick the bottle and it will, appear in your eyes. That was like the vision. And then of course we had to pare that back, but that was what we started with.
Okay. So that was the initial vision, which you didn't get there until later. Now you have, what is it? 3D VinLocate, where you actually have created a 3D model of your cellar. And then it will actually like the bottle will light up when you're looking for it, correct?
Yeah, the augmented reality thing was just too much for people to. We tried it. We actually had a
Okay.
prototype of it. There's a whole setup process. You scan your floor, you scan your walls. Like it worked for like 2 cellars. It was really difficult process to set up, especially knowing our demographic. It was like the friction was too large. So we just said, you know what? What if we just do this in 3D? And that sparked VinLocate out of the augmented reality solution. And that was much easier to get going.
Okay. And nobody else is doing this in this space, in seller management space. Is that right?
Not to the level of detail that we're doing it. There's a few other products that let you kind of do it in 2D and that existed before that let you, visually see where your slots are, but none to the level of like, hey, we're going to show you your fridge or show you exactly what your cellar looks like and let you build it and find your bottles.
This makes me think of Mission Impossible, like one of the old movies where Tom Cruise is like dropped in from the top of the building and all the red lines are mapping out where your bottle is and mapping out the cellar.
Yeah,
But
and it's funny because people ask us for like, hey, can I install a laser at the top of in my ceiling? And when I select the bottle, it points to the bottle. And like, one day, maybe one day,
hey, big dreams.
big
The
dreams.
funny thing is, back to the origin story is I think so. Basically, you created the app originally. By the way, did you call it InVintory when you first put it on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the one thing that my dad insisted was that be the name of the company and of the app.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Just because he was like, I know I'm taking inventory. That's the name. We just
he
spell
just
it
he just
differently. Like,
liked it. He made a
okay.
logo. My pushback on that was I have to change the logo. The logo was so bad. And so we ran with a logo for like 2 years, and then we hired a product designer who redesigned it. But
Okay.
yeah, he came up with the name at the time.
I got to say, when building companies, I think like your gut instinct more than not is the right way. It's like just something sticks. It was the same with Wine Centric.
Yeah, it was almost such a corny name. I hated it because it was like too on the nose. It was almost like a joke within the name. But we've got so many compliments on the name since that I've learned to love it.
The marketing 101 is it has to be on the nose. People need to know exactly right off the bat what you do. What is your thing, right?
Yeah.
But the original story goes, I think once you created the inventory app, you put it out there and it was like your dad told a couple of friends and then the next thing you looked and you had 20,000 users. Is that right?
Yeah, skipping a few steps, but essentially that's what happened. We used his friends as sort of like a beta group, a way to see if we were really onto something. They would use inventory. They would also use Cellar Tracker. They would compare side by side. They would run with both for a while, which, is a lot to ask for people, but they would do it, on their own accord. I want to run with both. And it helped us understand where we were falling short or what we needed to do. And then when we got to a certain point, one summer, I think it was the summer of 2021, we just said, hey, let's just throw some ad dollars behind this. And maybe the dumbest, smartest thing we've ever done because we wasted a ton of money, but we kickstarted the business. That's how we kind of got 20,000 downloads. It was much cheaper to run ads back then before Meta came in and made everything more difficult. But we were able to get a lot of users quickly. And what's good about that is we got a lot of feedback quickly. So you're able to
Mhm.
get much faster when you have more users.
What do you mean then when you say you wasted the money? It sounds like a pretty good investment from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, if you actually look back, we spent a lot of money that summer, like upwards of the ad spend we have now. It wasn't measured. So the difference between the way we operate, 6 years later is every dollar that goes into our advertising funnel is measured. We understand how far a dollar takes us in terms of payback. Then we just were like, let's just give this a shot. We didn't measure anything. I'm sure if you
Yeah.
look back and you look at like the cost per installs and you look at the unit economics, it probably worked out.
Yeah.
But there was definitely some waste. And for the level of ad spend we had, which was, I think we spent like 100K in a few months, it made no sense with no tracking and no measurement. It was pretty naive of us to do that. But every business has stories where they waste money. It's just, I think, especially when you're getting started.
Yeah. But I guess the ROI is 20K users. So maybe it's a little overpay for that, but it's a good jumping off point. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Little bit of an investment.
okay. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of that. So you said you were able to get a lot of feedback and you got a lot of feedback. What was some of the feedback that became integral to how you operate today?
A lot of it was user experience. So understanding how is the best way to use this? How can we make this better than Cellar Tracker or easier to use than Cellar Tracker? We got a ton of feedback on the 3D piece, the VinLocate piece, which helped us really hone that in. And so kind of every friction point, we were able to patch it up and make it better. Also, another big piece to inventory, and I think a lot of wine apps, is the database. We started out with a certain base of data, and then we have a feature obviously where you can submit a wine if we don't have it. And people were submitting hundreds and hundreds of wines a day, which helped us
Mm.
build the database up. So we kind of needed that. We didn't know it at the time, but we really needed that to help build up that database to where it is today.
And how many wines are in the database today?
So we've done some culling because we originally had, I think, over like 1.5 million wines. And then we realized that a lot of those didn't actually have images or complete data. So we deleted those from our database, and we're now at 650,000, almost 700,000 with rich data. And that's
Okay.
wines without vintages. Those are wines and not what we call labels, which are wines with vintages. Those are wines. So if you actually add up the ones with vintages, it's probably over 2 million, maybe more.
Okay. Got it. And just for a reference point, how many wines are in the database of, what is known as the giants of the cellar management industry?
Yeah, this is one of the toughest problems in the industry, is the database and understanding, what the source of truth is. I would say it's hard to compare apples to apples to those products because the way they handle their data is a lot different than us. We would rather have a smaller, better, more rich data set than a larger, sparse data set. So for example, Vivino has millions, but of those millions, if you actually go in, a lot of them don't have any data or no image. So that to us doesn't count. We wouldn't surface that to our users. Again, Cellar Tracker just has a different quality database. They've got a ton more user generated content on all of their wines, but less, I would say, source of truth content. I think it's been getting a lot better actually recently. So kudos to them.
Yeah.
For us, we've made it a point from the beginning to be sommelier managed. So, we started with, back before AI, we had like upwards of 15 to 20 sommeliers employed by inventory to comb through, correct the data, all that stuff. Then as we were able to automate more and more with a great degree of accuracy, we were able to bring that down to one. So we have Martine, she's awesome. She works on our database and she just makes sure everything is accurate. And so that's, a big difference with, and I'm not sure how Cellar Tracker, Vivino, or the other apps do it, but some may automate it all the way through. Some may have some kind of review process, but we want to make sure that everything has an eye of a sommelier on it.
That's a big differentiating factor. The fact that you guys are not just taking user info and accepting that as fact, rather it's being fact checked. So Martine is the sommelier on staff. Is that Martine's full-time job?
It is.
Okay. And then the other sommeliers you had in the past, was that their full-time or that was like an ancillary?
Yeah, it was part-time. So they would, work at a restaurant, at night, and during the day they'd use it as kind of like a research project for them, because every new one that came in, they would never have seen it and they'd go and research it. It was quite fun for a lot of them.
Oh, I'm sure any sommelier that's ever walked the floor. And when I did my time, it was always, well, what the heck am I going to do after this? Because I can't do this all the time. So to find something like that where you're still in the wine game and still doing it, that's pretty cool. So I used the app a little bit earlier today, and it was very cool. You simply take your camera out, it scans the image, and voila, it gives you all the information. And then if it doesn't have the information, essentially you would just upload the winery, the vintage, the region, right? And then at some point, I imagine that would get into your system and then the information would come back.
That's exactly it. The way that works is, if we don't have the wine in our database, you submit it, like you said, it goes through.
Do you just submit it through the app, like when you're uploading the information?
Yeah. Yeah. So it will say like, we don't have this wine. Would you like to create a new one? You do that. It goes through AI research and automation. So largely that's taken care of to a high degree of accuracy. Anything that we can't find, it gets flagged for review by our team. But even the ones that get that, the core information, like the region, the producer, the country, appellation, like all that stuff, goes to Martine, gets approved. Then it gets queued up for like what we call data enrichment, which is where we get the price, drink windows, anything that we need to get that's, auxiliary to the wine. We fetch all that stuff. And this is something we are actively working on making a lot better. But that's essentially the process right now. It's a very sophisticated process that has taken us years to build, but, frees up a lot of our time. and mental effort.
Yeah. Talk to me about information sourcing, because I think that, like, as I'm hearing this and you think about the user information versus factual information versus having somebody on staff, and then like, are you using, obviously for critic scores, you're using the journals and the wine spectators of the world and that and those sort of things, but like, is there even things where if you find a new wine that you're looking up the winery? Talk to me about those, that information sourcing process.
Yeah. So for the general info, the AI handles a lot of that for us. Like it will do research and it will match to a high degree of confidence to the producer website, something like that, pull the relevant information off. If it's uncertain, we tend to be conservative because we don't want to hallucinate information. We flag it from our team and she'll do that. So she'll go on the website and pull all that information. For like the prices, we have two data source prices. We've got LiveX, which I think a lot of people trust in the industry. So that's really big for building trust for our brand. And then a newer one called Wine Labs, which has kind of come out in the last, I want to say 6 months. Amazing to work with. Great company, smart people, and they basically fetch retail prices across the internet for wines that LiveX won't cover for us. So they do a great
And
job
that's called
there.
Wine Labs.
Wine Labs. Shout out Wine Labs,
Yeah.
amazing company.
Because that brings up a really other interesting point, because I think the industry reference for now is either Wine Searcher or Vivino, right? For pricing. And I mean, we all know, anybody who's listening, I'm not saying anything wrong. People from Wine Searcher can come after me, but those prices are always suspect. They give you an average price, or some retailer is fighting with another retailer. And so they're just listing a lowest price. And then when you actually go buy it, that's not the actual price you're paying for it. So
Yeah.
how does this technology differ in that?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it in terms of the key issues. Like Wine Searcher has, we've used them before, and they have a lot of incorrect pricing. Sometimes it will show like the pack size when it meant the individual bottle size and not flag it. So you'll see extremely inflated prices for your wine sometimes, and that's hard to manage at scale. Wine Labs, well, LiveX, it tends to be more conservative with their market price. So they'll actually take auction price and use that, which tends to be lower than what would be sold at retail. But their market price does like a little bit of a blend algorithm. So it can find like something that's a little more in the middle. But LiveX will tend to be lower than anything you'll find at a retail cost on purpose.
Okay.
A part of that is also that we don't want to overvalue people's collection when they get their collection value, because there's probably more issues with overvaluing than undervaluing to some degree there. Wine Labs has a similar type of approach to it. They just have more data. Like Wine Labs has data scraping solved to the max as it pertains to the wine industry. So they've done a really, really great job at that. And yeah, we're happy to be partnered with them.
And so LiveX and Wine Maps, these are not organizations or businesses that are actually selling wine. They're simply just finding retail prices and information.
Yeah, like LiveX is like an index, and Wine Labs actually, their goal was originally to help bottle shops and restaurants price their wine appropriately based on other ones near them. So it was like almost like competitor insight into what other people are pricing their wine at. And I think that they've expanded based on the demand that they've gotten from other types of businesses in the industry.
You know, it's crazy, Josh. I mean, I've been in this business for a very long time. I've worked in retail, I've worked in restaurants, I've worked in the media side of things, and I've never heard of these two companies. So I think that's golden information as well. And the fact that you found them and working with them speaks to your resourcefulness. Let's move on to some of the other capabilities for the InVintory app. The other thing that's super cool that you built, speaking about AI, and again, you have a master's in this, so I think you would be a resource to chat about it, but you built basically the AI sommelier. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's right. And every time I hear that, based on the last year of us being live with this, a part of me is proud of it. A part of me makes me cringe because like it's been so divisive, and it would be an interesting conversation here, actually.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start about the part that's been divisive and like you want to start negative, or you want to start with the actual
Maybe I'll start
piece?
neutral. Why don't I describe
Okay.
what it is, and then we can get into the pros and cons of this whole thing. But essentially, what we've built with InVintory is exactly what Match said. An AI sommelier. So it helps you. The goal of it really, we never want to replace sommeliers in the industry. The goal is like if you're a private collector, you don't always have access to one. on demand. And if you did that knew your wine collection, that'd be great, but that's extremely expensive. So the economics of using something that's built into your app makes a lot more sense. And so what you can do with Vincent is what we've called it, is you can ask Vincent things about wine, and he is, quite knowledgeable on those topics because we fed him books and books and books on wine. But what's even more cool is you can ask Vincent questions about, if you're hosting, like I'm having 5 friends over and I want something that pairs well with steak and we're celebrating a birthday and I want to make sure that I have enough bottles to serve all of these people. Vincent knows exactly what to look for in your cellar and give you a few options to recommend and why and how to serve it. And it just really helps you when you don't have that SOM on demand. And so I know my dad uses Vincent. He knows a lot about wine. Like I'm sure he could go through his collection on his phone and just pick a bottle. But sometimes Vincent will pick something he forgot he had that's perfect
Right.
for the occasion. So that's Vincent. That's largely the positives of it.
Yeah. And sometimes also you forget either what you have or like there's this one of the Italian varietals and you can't remember the name of it. And it's like, oh, what's that soccer move? That's also the name of an Italian grape.
Yeah.
And Vincent will probably know, oh, it's Rabona, which is super, we all don't remember these things, even sommeliers. And so Vincent, I'm sure, has those capabilities. So that's
Yeah,
pretty
and
cool.
to touch on like what people remember and don't remember, like the biggest thing that we hear often with inventory in general is like, I know where my wines are. I know what I have. And it's like my dad always says, I'll play a game with you. If you can remember exactly what you have to a T, then I owe you a bottle of wine. If you can't remember what you have, even one bottle, then you owe me a bottle of wine and you have to use inventory. So, no one ever wants to take them up on that because they know they're just saying something that they can't actually prove.
Right. They'll forget
They'll
something
forget.
for sure. Okay. You've given us the neutral scenario. Sounds pretty positive. I'm not mad at that. What are the other, what's the other sides of
Yeah,
Vincent?
the other side of the coin, it's not actually an issue with the product itself. It's more about the optics of AI infiltrating industries at large. So I've found that the wine industry is way more resistant to accepting the use of AI in its industry. Like if you look at
Yeah.
financial services, if you look at anything else, it's like bring it on because these are problems that people feel need to be solved. I think that there's this idea that, oh, if you're injecting AI into the wine industry, you're taking jobs from sommeliers. And that is absolutely not what we're trying to do. And I think it gets misconstrued that way sometimes. As I said, like the economics of having a SOM that you always have access to is just not feasible. But for some reason, I understand why SOMs may feel this way, but I would urge them to try and look at it as a tool even for themselves to learn. And it's kind of like any industry. Like I'm a software engineer. AI has infiltrated my industry, but I'm not fighting it. I'm adopting it to help me become a better software engineer. So I think it goes for every industry.
Yeah. I think that people should adapt. The AI has its uses, and right, it doesn't mean it's taking over human process or it's not taking over the human ability. But I've even just done some trial runs where I'll give a shout out. I do a supper club monthly where I pair 7 wines for 7 courses, and I have parameters and I have the dishes and I have, there's price parameters. And I just asked, I was using Copilot
Mm.
and I asked it within these, gave it the parameters, the prompts, and the wine pairings were good. They were good suggestions, but what it did for the most was it gave me a jumping off point where it's like, instead of looking at 1,500 different wines, it kind of narrowed the space down to even 50 wines, where it'd be like, that doesn't work. But you know what? That reminds me this will work. So I think it's a great like check and balance also for you. And it's like, just think about a writer and how many times, if you've ever written a school paper, an essay, whatever, that you have writer's block and you just need that somebody to spark an idea or spark to get onto the next one. It's great for those sort of things. And so I can imagine having a dinner party where you're just like, hey, I have these really hipster friends coming over. They always want to try something new. What do I have in my cellar that I forgot that I didn't buy on my trip to, whatever. And
Yeah,
it
and
gets it.
I've actually two comments on this. I mean, the first is that I agree with you 100%. But one thing that AI can't do, or Vincent can't do in this
Yeah,
context, is smell and taste the wine. And people forget
right.
that. Like the robot, there's no place to pour it into your phone and be like, "What is this good? Is this? Can I serve this tonight?" Like that's not the point. And so people are forgetting that. And I don't think we'll ever really be able to do that to the level that a human can. So rest assured, Vincent's not coming for anyone's job. And the second is, before AI ever even became popular or mainstream, we would get feature requests all the time for like, can you recommend me from my cellar what I should be able to drink, or make it like a fun little wheel that I spin and it pulls a bottle out based on certain parameters I give it. And then we introduce AI, and the people who ask for those things do love it. But then we start running ads. And this is largely where the feedback's coming from the ads that we're putting out, is like, oh, I don't need a stupid robot to tell me what to drink. And although I love when people comment that because it's great for our reach.
Sure.
It's
like
still
the rage bait.
Rage bait's a whole other topic. I'd love to talk about it. It really works, unfortunately. But that's not the purpose. I think it's being mislabeled as something else,
Yeah. Look at it as supplemental as opposed to essential. So as the AI master here, I've read a little bit about this stuff. You don't think there will ever be some sort of sensory components to this? Like, won't there be, because essentially, yes, all of our brains are wired differently, but it's a chemical reaction to when we smell and taste things. And that's why we all smell and taste things differently. But isn't there sort of something that you can put together mathematically that will replicate how something smells or tastes, or even like a thing where your iPhone will blow out a scent or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah. So that's where my brain was going before. And the answer is 100%. Like, that will exist, but it will never be able to replace is the human emotion around what you're tasting.
Mm-hmm.
It can tell you not corked, or it could tell you faulted. It could tell you complex. It could tell you long finish. It might be able to tell you these factual things that, ultimately you could taste yourself, but it can't tell you like, when I drink this, I feel a certain way, or I feel happy, or this brings me back to this memory, or this, like, these are all essential components to drinking wine, I think, and the art of wine. So wine it's not, you can't just boil it down to a science. Like and I can't believe I'm even saying these words because I'm a very logical, scientific person, but there is an art behind the bottle and an art to the juice. And I just think that should never be lost.
Wasn't it in The Matrix where there was one scene where they implanted the kind of emotion or feeling of eating like a big steak dinner?
I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious.
The emotion, like,
A simulated emotion.
all simulated. I mean, now we're getting into philosophy, which is like, what is emotion? Like, can you simulate emotion? Can a computer have emotions? This is like the whole Turing test to kind of, that. But seriously, these discussions are going to become more and more prominent as the future unfolds, I think.
Yeah. And I think these are the same things that people probably who are using inventory successfully enjoy, because it's not only the emotion of drinking the wine, but like the emotion of collecting, the emotion of knowing, oh, this is what I have, and being able to see this on a day-to-day basis on an app, on a desktop. Like, all those things are super effective.
It's funny you're bringing that up. I keep thinking the collectible space is taking off. Hockey cards, baseball cards, basketball cards,
Pokemon cards.
Huge. It's so massive. And then there's like wine on the side, collecting wine. And it's like, I think it's getting more popular, but it's funny that it's in the same category, but I wouldn't necessarily describe it as taking off in the same level. Maybe there's like a sub wave that's coming down, an influence from that industry into wine collecting that's a little more subtle. Maybe it's the price to enter that space is a little bit higher. But my prediction is over the next few years, it's going to catch wind and blow up, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's a big movement, right? In not only for cellar management space for you, but it's that social interaction about the wines, right? So how does that work for inventory? Is there chat rooms? How are people interacting on the app or with the app or in social circumstances?
Yeah. Right now, only through creating a community review is the only way we really have people seeing other activity from other members. But this is a huge focus for us this year. So we are planning to build a suite of social features that are going to, almost replicate the way that people are collecting wine with each other and the way that wine collectors behave in the real world. We want to replicate that digitally. So think, we drew a lot of inspiration from other apps like Strava for groups and communities and stuff like that. So that's kind of the direction that we're going to be heading in, is taking, not just the cellar management piece, but bringing in the social piece where, we're almost missing a key behavior of wine collecting is collecting with others. And so we're going to bring that in and round out the platform. I think people will love it, what we're building. And I think it's going to take us to the next level here.
So walk me through tech, like tangibly how that works. I just got I don't know, I get my DRC allocation and then I get to talk to my friends about it, brag to my friends about it. Like tell me exactly what that'll be like.
Yeah, I think there'll be an element of that. So, but the backbone behind how we want people to socialize is going to be this feature called groups. So for example, you can join a group like the Toronto Burgundy Lovers or something. That could be an example of a group. And I can join that group and I can connect with other people that, feel the same way about Burgundy in my city. And so it could be a great way to meet people. It could be a great way to share bottles with each other and get opinions. We're going to have private groups that you can create with friends. And that's where you can see like, hey, I just added these bottles to my collection. That can be, with privacy in mind, all of these things, of course, because we're dealing with expensive assets. But we want to be able to bring people together in that way.
And how does that work? So that will be through the app, or that will be you enter a separate chat room?
It'll be through the app. So there'll be like
Okay.
a social section or a community section. There'll be a list of groups that might be relevant to you. You can join them. You can request to join others. And this is where we want to bring in some of like the producers as well, because, we're going to have a very focused group of people that they may want to reach. And those people may want to hear from producers that, they're interested in as well. So we can connect producers and collectors together and fill that void. Because right now, if you think about it, there's not really many ways for producers to actually communicate with the end collector. They sell to distributors, retailers, sometimes direct to consumer through allocation. But after that, it's just through email. So we'd love to be that conduit.
I love that. I love anything that's media centric in wine. So that's great. So a couple of questions here as we start to wind down. Let's say I'm a new collector in wine and I'm thinking about what I should use to collect and follow and cellar management. Like I said, and all of these apps, entities, businesses have their positives and negatives. What would make me choose inventory over, say, Vivino Cellar Tracker, or I think there's another thing that's probably a close competitor, Vino Cell, that I've heard
Yeah,
of?
there's lots, and there's more coming up just from, AI, but none of them of the quality of the top three, I would say. My first piece of advice would be to download them all. Run with 3 or 4 of them, log the wines in 3 or 4 of them and see which process you like better. It's what we always recommend. We're confident enough in our product to know that people will choose us for
Yeah.
one reason or another. But typically people love our user experience. That's like the number one thing right off the bat that people tell us about is like, I love how easy it is to enter my wines in. And this is something we're always working on, is how to get people's wines in quicker. Also say, if you care about the location of your wines in your fridge or wine cellar, we are the choice for you. I don't think that the other products do this or do this at all or well. And yeah, I mean, choose us if you want to invest in something where we're going to invest in you. We listen to our customers on a quarterly basis. We're always improving the product. So for the same subscription price, you get more and more every single year. But run with all of them and see which one you like best.
And the other thing that I think is pretty cool is you truly are a family company. Like it was you and your dad that started it. You are currently CEO and you're a small business. How many people totally in your employ?
We're now 11.
That's crazy.
Very small. Yeah. People don't realize that, they'll write into customer support and think we're like a 50 to 100 person company and we're just 11 people, 1 person on customer support. Usually there's only 4 engineers. So it's, and deliberately it's designed that way. But yeah, my wife had worked and still does do some work for inventory as well. She was in charge of marketing and then we had our first child and she kind of had to step away, but she does some of our social media. My dad's very much still involved, chair of the board. So family business, pros and cons to that. But yeah, it's been great.
That's such a cool thing. 11 people to the level and notoriety that you've gotten to is really impressive. So what sticks in your craw, Josh? What are you grinding on that's bothering you either for your company that you want to see change or just in the cellar management space that isn't there right now and that you're trying to make?
Oh my God, amazing question. What gnaws at me every day, and we've spent so much time on this anyways, is the level of manual work that's still required to keep a cellar up to date.
Okay.
I'm keeping my ears very close to the ground of new technology that's coming out or going to come out that's going to help automate this process. Because at the end of the day, collectors are lazy and they want it all done right away and automatically. And imagine you can buy wine and it just goes in your cellar, tells you where to put it in the slots, or you put it in the slots and it already knows. I want to eventually get there with inventory. And I think we will eventually get there. And the second is more tangible, and something we're working on right now is like getting more and better data around our wines, better drink windows, more rich data, things like, if we give you a drink window, let's say the drink window is between 2018 and 2035, what does that wine taste like, even before it hits the drinkable range? What would it taste like in the early parts of the drinkable range? What is it going to taste like past its prime? Because what I've learned is some people love their wine where we would describe it as past prime.
Mhm.
Their preference. So what is it going to taste like there? And then that really informs your taste profile. And so,
Yeah.
drink windows are just guidelines. It's not, it gets deeper than that. And I want to be able to drill down on these kinds of things in the app.
I love that. I love when people do some of the earliest collectors that I met in my career. If they had a wine they loved and they would buy, multiple cases of it, they would open up a bottle like almost every year. And I think probably Cellar Tracker does that and you're probably getting there, but then they would, take extensive notes every year. So you really see how that wine changes over the years. And I think that's such a cool thing about collecting if you do that.
Yeah. And I agree. And I just had a bottle with a guy who told me that he loves his white Burgundies, extremely old. And I was a bit skeptical, like how old. We had an '07, forget the exact bottle, but oh my God, the color was so yellow too. I was like, I don't know. It's what's a little past peak, but it was delicious. And that
Yeah.
it actually changed the way I think about it now. I'm like, I kind of want to drink more older white Burgundies just to see if has the same structural taste components that this one had.
I just think in general, and even to myself, we don't really have such a palate for old wines, mostly because we just don't know what they taste like. So it's a little bit of an esoteric, and obviously a lot of the fruit can be gone, but that doesn't mean that there's not still a lot of interesting, enjoyable stuff going on. And also there's a lot of bottle variation, right? So if you're not cellaring appropriately, then, you might have something that maybe 1 out of 6 bottles is good. And you taste the rest. And you're like, oh, well, this wine just isn't good. And then you
Yeah.
finally taste the one that's good. And you're like, oh, wait, what was the difference here? So that's a problem, which also leads me to the question of what about in the cellar management space? Is there advisory on how are you storing the wine? What temperature you're storing the wines at? How they different? Like, is inventory advising you on that as well?
So the AI Vincent can advise you on that. We've actually
Okay.
just discussed this a lot internally because we wanted to add a data point to every line, like how to store this. But
Yeah.
based on our research, like the advice is largely the same for red. Like it differs between, no, I would say like it's largely the same for every single wine. Like just store it at a, not cold, but a cool temperature in a cellar and don't touch it. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't differ.
Consistency is king.
Yeah, it's more like how to serve it, which as changes, depending on what wine you're drinking, how young, how old, is it a red, is it a white, what region sometimes. And so that's more important. Like I think the serving instructions versus the storing instructions change
And
more.
do you have that? Is that part of the rich data, the serving instructions?
We have decanting time right now, but we're going to be expanding on this. So
Okay.
we are going to be expanding on, how long to decant it, what temperature, and then not only that, but like what wine glass would this best be served in? Because people don't pay much attention to that. I mean, depends if you have all the types of wine glasses, but that's sort of where we're heading.
Yeah. And if you don't have all types of wine glass, shameless plug here, get yourself a glass Vin universal glass and it solves all the problems. And use my code. I'll flash it on the screen there.
There you go.
Well, the other thing that you alluded to about, having one-stop shopping, because I did notice on the app that you could set up your purchases. So it seems like you already can do that. Like if you're buying wine and you're getting 12 bottles of Clos de Val Cabernet or Ridge Montebello, it can already tell you and import it and put it in the system for you. I mean, you physically are going to have to there's no robot arms, but you're physically going to have to put it there, but it probably can tell you where it's going and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, first of all, 2 great wines you just mentioned. Second of
Thank you.
all, we're great producers. Second of all, yeah, we have a deliveries feature and we're actually, as we speak, our engineers are expanding on on this feature right now. So we're kind of converting the concept of a delivery into a purchase. And the reason that we're doing this is because we want you to be able to, when you buy a wine, even on allocation, whether you get an email about it or you buy from retail to be delivered, you can just scan the receipt. The receipt uploads into your deliveries. It, will put that in your deliveries for you, tell you when it's coming. And then we're going to take this to the next level where when you get a tracking link, you put it in there, automatically update for you and tell you when your wines are coming and queue it up to be added to your cellar when that actually arrives. So right now, as it stands today, yes, you can track your deliveries. You got to do it mostly manually. You put the bottles in. If only some of them came, you could do a partial delivery and put some of the bottles in your cellar. But yes, there's this component that's separate from your cellar that helps you track what's coming.
And does the 3D locate tell you where to put it in your cellar?
Not yet. It's a highly requested feature, but if you do go to tap to put in the bottles in the cellar, you can see where all the empty slots are. So you can actually say like, okay, I'm just going to put one here, one here. And that's kind of the beauty of the 3D model is you don't have to organize your cellar by region or producer or whatever. You can organize it by color if you want to, because it will know where all the bottles are.
That makes sense. But if you do want to do it like a sommelier, will it say, yes, this is how, let's say Le Bernardin with Aldo Sam would organize your wine list, right? By region, price, varietal, etc. Could it do that as well?
Not yet,
And
but that's coming. It's
Okay.
our roadmap.
Cool. Josh, what does inventory look like 5 years down the road, then 10 years down the road? And I guess in the bigger overall umbrella, what does the wine cellar management and tech look like 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, great. Oh, hard-hitting questions. 5 years from now, I really hope that we are the leading platform for wine collecting. And not only that, but the hub for wine, hub for serious collectors or people who are really into wine. That doesn't just mean collecting wine. It could be drinking wine. It could be learning about wine. We just want to become that platform that people go to and know about. 10 years from now, a bit harder to predict, but, kind of ties into your second question where I would really hope that there's a ton more automation, whether that's visual automation where, a lot, I actually don't think in 10 years that there's going to be an app at all. I think that inventory is going to become infrastructure for something even greater. So the way you interface with inventory may not be through a phone. It may be through your glasses. It may be through speakers. It may be through your new AI assistant that's in every home. Maybe Apple makes it. And you just talk to them and say, hey, I want to put bottles here, 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 or I want these bottles out of the cellar. And inventory is the underlying data infrastructure behind that technology. It's not going to be replaced. It becomes the foundation.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Last question for you. Right now, I think from my perception, you're mostly B2C. So, to collectors. You mentioned in the beginning that there were some cruise lines or other business entities that were taking on the technology. What does that look like? And is that a push for you to get into the restaurant space, restaurant groups, retail?
Yeah, so we do have some hotels, yachts, restaurants using inventory at the enterprise level. We usually take these more inbound. And partially the reason for that is like team size for us. It's a lot of accounts to manage and a lot of these deal sizes and needs of these customers, it takes time to sell them. So the deal cycles are longer. It's something that, we offer, and we actually have a suite of features that are built for them. Like we just added selling price. So, if you're a restaurant, there's a new field where you can put what you sell the bottle at and what your cost is and what the markup is. So you can track all of that stuff. You can use our API. An API is basically a way for two systems to talk to each other over the internet. Just a way to integrate, which lets you hook into like your POS system or whatever you need to do that with. So we have a suite of features that you can use. It is something we want to expand, but very cautiously and selectively with certain clients.
Yeah. And I've heard you say this before, and obviously it's brilliant, but like, whether you have a dedicated wine professional, a sommelier in your restaurant, let's say that person needs a night off or isn't available, or you're super busy and somebody who's not as knowledgeable needs to find where that wine is, the VinLocate thing obviously makes it super easy. So that's a great feature. But also just thinking about it, the one thing when I was running a BLT restaurant is I always wanted to go digital wine list, but the POS system would never speak to the inventory system, and especially not in real time. So let's say you go through 10 bottles in a night and your inventory is 10 bottles. Well, if you had a digital menu, somebody's going to order that wine and have no idea that it's out. Now, arguably the same thing happens on a menu, right? Somebody has to say, sorry, we are out of that wine. But I think the idea of a digital list is that it speaks to your inventory in hopefully real time or somewhat. Is that capable? Like, can inventory speak through Spot On or Toast or any of the big POS systems?
Not with a native integration, but technically that could be possible today. With our
Okay.
API, you can sync up you can sync up your POS system with inventory, as long as there's a middleman in there to be able to do that work. This has been a widely requested feature for us to build. As you know, there's like 90 to 100 different POS systems, and a lot of them are not modern at all. And not every
Yeah.
restaurant is on them. So it opens up a can of worms for us where this is why we said, let's build the API, and any restaurant who might have, or restaurant group who might have a technical team of one engineer who wants to like do that integration, they can do that. But it's definitely possible. If you connect the POS to inventory and you give them an iPad, they can see in real time what wines you actually have. All of our infrastructure becomes available via the API, and other systems can now talk to inventories should they choose. Taking this even further, we just built like AI integration. So Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT can talk to inventory as well. So you can say, pull me a report from last night of everything that was consumed, and it can do that, and it can reconcile it against your finances, for example. So that's all available as well. And this is how we want to stay on the cutting edge.
That's very cool. Very cool. Well, Josh, this has been enlightening. I really appreciate your time here. And I am going to go fill up my inventory app here with all my bottles and finish the job. And for all of you out there, download inventory and it will help you drink deliciously. Thanks, Josh.
Love it. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.